the agency's progress on the Orion Crew Module, the spacecraft under development to take humans beyond Earth orbit and on the journey to Mars. My name is Stephanie Shearholtz from NASA's Office of Communications, and I will be moderating today's call. We will be discussing the key decision point C for the Orion spacecraft. A news release was issued at 12:30 with the primary news for this call for the topic of discussion today. And joining us today to discuss it are NASA's Associate Administrator, Robert Lightfoot, and Bill Gerstenmaier, NASA's Associate Administrator for the Human Exploration and Operations Mission Directorate. We'll get started shortly with opening remarks from both. As was noted, your phones are on mute, and to get into the question queue, you can press *1 at any time. About 1 hour after the conclusion of the call, you can listen to a replay by dialing toll-free 866-481-6889, and the numeric passcode for that replay is 7897. Again, the toll-free replay number that will be active about an hour after the call concludes is 866-481-6889, and the numeric passcode is 7897. The operator will call on you and open and close your mic so you can ask your question. Please stick to one question and identify to whom it is directed. If we have time, we'll allow reporters to ask a second question. We have about a half an hour for today's call. Mr. Lightfoot and Mr. Gerstenmaier both will share some remarks before we take your questions. Mr. Lightfoot, I'll let you get started.
Hey, thanks, Stephanie, and thanks to everyone that's tied in this afternoon. Before I jump into the decision that we made for Orion Key Decision Point C, I thought I would just kind of describe the agency process, remind everyone what the process is inside the agency as we assess our programs and projects. Key Decision Point C, or KDPC is what we refer to it a lot, is a very critical milestone for all our programs and projects in the agency. It's really comprised of two key areas that we review. We take a look at the technical progress of a program and do a programmatic assessment as well. We have a standing review board that provides us an independent assessment to each program or project that's being reviewed. For the technical, at Key Decision Point C, the agency, my board assesses the program's successful completion of their preliminary design review, or PDR as we call it. And it grants approval to proceed to critical design review, which is what is the key kind of point for the program from a technical standpoint. For programmatic, the agency, we use KDPC as a place where we set the agency baseline commitment. We confirm the program is going to, be at this cost and this schedule. Is kind of our to our external stakeholders, and it becomes a basis by which we report back externally. And we do that at what we call a joint confidence level of 70%. Joint being between the cost and the schedule. What's our confidence level as we move forward? It's also for us. This is the commitment that we're held to for breach reporting and things like that we have to do that are congressionally mandated on us as we strive to complete these missions. We found 70% is kind of a best practice for us, and for the past several years we've used that as a measure in terms of setting this agency baseline commitment. Now, while we do that, we routinely have the programs and projects work to internal dates that are a lot more aggressive. I chair this review, the Agency Program Management Council, where we have these reviews, and I hear from the programs and the Standing Review Board. And then I hear from also the rest of the convening authorities, the chiefs of the agency, the mission directorate that owns the programs and projects, and then the other convening authorities there is kind of my. And then we make a decision on what the agency has said is their agency baseline commitment, and that's where we head out. And this happens with all our programs and projects. We do it a lot more in science than we do human exploration programs, but we started moving human exploration programs in this direction to try to set these commitments as we move forward. So that's kind of the agency process that we go through, and like I said, Orion was the next one in the barrel for that. And we have them come through, 2 or 3 quarterly with missions that we have in the agency. But the scope for this review, Orion has always been working towards EM2, which is our second mission, second exploration mission that we have in the queue. We chose EM2 because that was established several years ago, recognizing that EM2 was the first crewed mission and that it would have all the systems on board that we need for an Orion. So it would be a full-up Orion. For those of you that follow us closely, you know that the Space Launch System and the ground systems, their commitment is for readiness for an EM1. So that's a that's the subtle difference in how we assess that. For Orion, we held our review last month in August for EM2 based on the PDR results from last October, and that's really important because this was a while ago. As the chair of the council, I made the decision that I felt like we needed to get EFT1 behind us, even though these guys had already completed PDR. And I felt EFT1 was a good risk reduction activity. Obviously, we were using it as a risk reduction activity for us, and the results of that should be factored into what we commit as an agency moving forward. So we held off on having the key decision point until after we got an EFT1 in and had an opportunity to review the data from that. So for the two parts of the review, for the technical assessment, there were really no issues with the great progress the team's been making, and really nothing to stop them from clearing to proceed to CDR. And we sent them on their way from the technical side of the house. On the programmatic side, one of the requirements we have in the way we do all this from setting these decisions, setting these agency baseline commitments, is we have to reconcile the differences in the assessments between the Standing Review Board and the program. And we had a couple little pretty small differences between the probability of the risk, because what we really do with this 70% joint confidence level is we have a lot of discussion around what risk are we accepting going into this flight, where are the areas that are going to potentially bite us as we move forward, whether it's testing, software, all those different things. We have those kind of discussions. And sometimes the Standing Review Board and the program have differences of opinions on where that is. We also spent some time discussing the critical path and the risk around the critical path getting to EM2. The team came back in September, last week actually, did a great job, brought a great review in, Standing Review Board and the program, and they brought in and fed us the data we needed, and we did the assessment of that, and we we've now set the agency baseline commitment for EM2, or for readiness for EM2 for the Orion program. So coming out of the review, that was basically set to be no later than April 2023 at a development cost from October 2015 till the time we fly crew for the first time at $6.77 billion. Again, this is consistent with the funding levels from the President's budget request. It's also consistent with our established practices, as I described earlier, to make sure we account for, at this commitment point, any potential technical risks that may manifest themselves in the future, and any uncertainties we may have related to the budget as the budget gets rolled out. I've also asked the team to continue working toward the original August 2021 date. That's where their planning is today. They're planning to that date and working to that date, recognizing that we have much lower confidence in that date. But I saw no reason this early in the process to change that date as I call it the working to date for the team, and neither did the Standing Review Board. The Standing Review Board said there's no reason to change it at this point. The setting of the commitment for us just encompasses what we believe are historical programmatic risks that we see themselves manifested in different ways. So the team's going to continue to work toward the August 2021 date. We will, but we're committing that we'll be no later than 2023, April 2023. Obviously, we don't stop here. We monitor the progress of the team basically annually, like we've been doing with Space Launch System, and we'll update those dates as well if we need to. But the team continues to make incredible progress toward that date. It's also important to note that we are building a big program here. We're building a multi-decadal human exploration program, and while the individual launches of EM1 and EM2 are very important, it's also and they are great indicators of our progress or how we're doing. We got to balance those individual missions with the overall context of this exploration journey we're on. So we take that into account as well, and again, it is a balance sometimes to make sure that we are marching the way we want to go here. So that's my opening statement, and what I'd like to do is just turn it over to Bill Gerstenmaier. I know he's got some comments to share, and he can talk about some of the progress being made. So, Bill?
Okay, thanks, Robert. Again, we had a very thorough review, both technically and programmatically, as part of the KDPC activity for Orion. I would say technically the teams are making very, very good progress. You can see the work that's going on down at MAF in preparing for EM1, and the systems and the hardware and the work we're doing on EM1 clearly folds into EM2, but A lot of the major elements are down in New Orleans, beginning welding. We've completed all the Pathfinder welds except for one weld on the Pathfinder system. So we're essentially building a test article down there to make sure that we can get all the welds and everything works right and the fixtures are lined up correct. So that's gone well. There's one more of those welds that need to be done. For the EM1 flight, actually one of the 7 welds is complete. That's already done. We'll go ahead and complete probably the Pathfinder weld and then move on to the beginning with the EM1 remaining welds to go forward. Almost all the hardware is down at MAF for welding on EM1, which is a very good sign. 3 of the cone panels still have to be delivered. One's undergoing inspection and then shipping, and they'll be there probably by the end of the year. Just a lot of really good activity is moving across the program. The avionics work out in Denver is going extremely well. We've got the flight computers in. Some of the power distributed units will be going in out there, and that's looking very, very good. Up at Plumbrook, some of the structural components are coming together for the service module. 2 structural components from the U.S. side as part of that are complete, and then probably towards the end of October, ESA will deliver the structural test article for testing up at Plumbrook. Again, software is going very well. There's been a lot of work done on software. We were able to leverage off of a lot of the software that flew off of EFT1, and we've made some architecture changes, but we'll embed that architecture or embed that software from EFT1 in the new architecture. So again, tremendous progress there. In terms of the heat shield, the full-scale heat shield engineering development article, it should be done at the end of the month. So again, just tremendous work across the program. You know, we're moving out, making very good, solid technical progress as we move towards this date. As Robert said, we'll work to an internal date that'll get the EM2 hardware and vehicle ready to fly much earlier than the 2023 date. We're aiming right now for August of 2021. And again, that activity looks good. We also looked at the programmatics, and we don't see any major showstoppers with the programmatics. The cost performance, the contractor performance has been good overall on Orion. So again, it looks pretty good from an overall review standpoint. So again, the program's making a really good, solid progress. EFT1, we delayed this review a little bit to see what we would learn out of EFT1. If you look at EFT1, the flight was almost flawless. Some small little minor things that needed to be changed, but nothing really big was learned from EFT1. We are making a heat shield change, but as I said, the engineering test article for that heat shield is already going to be complete by the end of this month, so that's moving very, very in a very good pace moving forward. The other things that we saw from EFT1 is that, this vehicle is really an inspiration to a lot of folks around the world. I get a chance to talk to all our international partners, and they see the progress we're making. They see the work we did with EFT1, and they know that we're really putting together a capsule that'll take humans beyond low Earth orbit and really push human presence into the solar system. So I think our partners are excited about the progress we're making. I think this review that occurred last month again shows we're on steady track. It also shows the complexity of what we're trying to do. But again, overall, I think the review was very thorough, and I look forward to your questions as we continue the conference today. Thanks.
Thank you both. Again, for those reporters on the line, if you would like to ask a question, please press *1 on your phone to get in the queue. The operator will announce you and open and close your mic. For you to ask your question, please stick to one question and identify to whom it is directed. If we have additional time, we'll allow reporters to ask a second question. We'll take the first question.
Thank you. Our first question comes from Marcia Dunn from the Associated Press. Your line is open.
I know it's for programmatic potential risk, but is that basically money while you're even advertising a no later than 2023?
Marcia, we missed the first part of your question. Could you please repeat it?
Yes. I'm just wondering why not just have a commitment date of 2021? What are the types of risks that you would see that would push it out to 2023?
Yeah. So, Marcia, this is Robert. To kind of just some of the things we discussed in the meeting. There's hardware reuse type of activities that are going on during the course of the project, where we felt it was better from an overall commitment standpoint. Well, we don't anticipate a problem there. We've seen problems like that in the past, and so the kind of green light schedule is that there won't be any problems using a piece of hardware from one test to the next. There's the structural test articles that have historically taken us longer to get through than we've seen. Software development, in our model, you got to realize this is a model that we run based on, all these previous programs. Software development typically takes longer than planned. But right now, again, we're not seeing any issues in those areas, but we have to account for those because we got a lot of runway in front of us here before we get there, and those things could pop up. So I think those are three of them that I remember we had a pretty large amount of discussion around during the review. And then the other piece is the European service module and how we tie it in. We've got the first one coming in for EM1, and this second one that we've got to make sure what we learn from EM1 will actually feed into what happens with EM2, obviously. And so those are some of the risks that are out there. And basically each time these guys hit a milestone in their testing or their production, they either retire a risk or we actually realize a risk, and that's kind of how we do it with them all. Does that help?
Yes, it does. And are you keeping the 2018 target date for EM1?
Yes.
That stays the same.
The readiness for all three systems. We still have to go through the process of when the critical design reviews are done at the end of this year. We said we would get everybody together at the end of the critical design reviews and assess what the actual date is for the three integrated programs. But there's nothing right now that gives us any indication different than the fall of 2018 for everybody being ready, and we'll set a launch date for the CDRs.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take the next question.
Our next question comes from Bill Harwood from CBS News. Your line is open.
Thanks a lot. For either of you, really, I guess it's kind of a follow-up on Marcia's question. EFT1, as Bill said, was an almost flawless mission. I'm trying to understand maybe what the two or three major things were that have changed or have forced you into, maybe force is not the right word, but have pushed this out to no later than versus no earlier than. I'm trying to understand what you've learned that has given you less confidence. Something specific. Thanks.
This is Kirsten Meyer. I started, and maybe Robert can add some things. I would say one thing we did is we did some changes to reduce weight. We took a lot of weight out of the structure for EM1 and EM2, roughly 500 pounds or so. And we also reduced the number of cone panels that make up the cone section of Orion. We did that because we thought it would save weight, and we thought it would save production time. It turned out that in manufacturing those panels, since they're now 120 degrees instead of the smaller number of degrees of more panels, they tend to unbend. They're shaped into a radius, and when we machine the material out to make them lighter, they tend to want to go back to a flat sheet. And we didn't recognize that would be a problem. So we're going to have to change, or the teams have actually changed already, some of the manufacturing techniques of these panels. So that's kind of an unknown that popped up. It's a small change. And I think we're being, somewhat conservative. My teams will tell you that they're trying to work every risk that's out there, every risk that the SRB has identified, the Standing Review Board has identified. We think we can handle those risks. But if you look at the complexity of what we're doing and building this that show up, and to protect for those, we went with the later date, the 2023. And then I'll see if Robert wants to add anything.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to say, Bill, is that we do have a fairly conservative approach, and it's really a model-based set of experiences that we have from previous programs. We've been trying to capture this for several years now, so that when we have these discussions, we don't miss something. And it's generic across all our programs and projects. The only other specific thing that we really had a lot of discussion around was when you look, we've made some decisions around the integrated test lab out in Denver, and that's a potential challenge for us. We haven't run as much through that process yet as we had to do for EFT1, and so we realize it could be a place where we've got an overload that we got to go work through. the advantage to doing it now, though, and what's good about it is, as Bill said, is we've identified these pretty early, and these guys are attacking them. They're kind of knocking them down as quick as they can, but we know there's going to be some unknown unknowns that pop up. That's just the history of just about every program.
Thanks.
Thank you. We'll take the next question.
Our next question comes from Irene Klotz from Reuters. Your line is open.
Thanks very much. I think this question is probably for Bill. What was the confidence level for the August 2021 date? And I have a follow-up, if that's okay.
I don't think we calculated a specific confidence level for 2021. Robert can help me there.
Yeah, we didn't do that from that standpoint because there was way too many variables on that. What we said was we know the team is working to that plan right now. It's not a very high confidence level, I'll tell you that, just because of the things we see historically pop up. But there was really no reason to move it. And again, the agency policy is 70%. So we decided we need to stick with the agency policy for what we're committing to.
Okay, generally you're saying it was like less than half that, or can you characterize that? And then I had a question about the $6.77 billion for development costs that basically the clock starting October 2015. Does that budget carry you all the way through EM2, or do you transition at some point into an operational budget that is outside of the numbers that this review encompassed?
So the budget piece, Gerst, you want to handle that one? Because I think that gets us to EM2, but there's other things that we're.
Yeah, that takes us to the budget that's described here takes us to EM2, and it doesn't include any EM3 or other hardware budget numbers. So it's just specific to EM2. And then going back to the confidence for the August 21 date. Again, we have discrete schedules that show we can make that date with some number of months margin. What we didn't do is we didn't run the math model, because you'd have to build a unique math model for essentially the build schedule we have to 2021. So we didn't go through all that, so we can't really speculate on what a JCL number is for that 21 date.
Thanks.
Thank you. We'll take the next question.
This question comes from Greg Redfern from WTOP News. Your line is open.
Thank you for taking my question. Gentlemen, I just have one question here. You speak a lot of the unknown factor as far as the schedule goes. Is there something that you're focusing in on as being the most critical milestone that has to be met for EM1, EM2? In other words, is there anything that's really keeping you guys up at night that you'd like to share? And thank you, and go Orion.
First, you want to hit that first? I can.
Yeah, I can. I'll hit a little bit. First of all, I don't think we stay up at night. We just work hard. But there's a lot of manufacturing. If you could maybe get from the program, can send you some pictures of a lot of the aluminum structure that comes together to make up this capsule. And if you look at it just from a manufacturing standpoint, we've filled up many of the large aluminum manufacturers throughout the United States that are building these parts. And so between what we're doing for SLS and what we're doing for Orion, we've taken a lot of activity in aluminum manufacturing and materials manufacturing, and we really filled up their processes with what we're doing. So we could run into a snag where we just can't get more work done through a fabrication shop, or we could run into where we're trying to order parts and we can't get parts just because we filled up all the parts for various pieces. So I think it's complex from an assembly standpoint. It's also complex from an ordering standpoint. It's a very, very integrated vehicle, and those are the kind of unknowns that we talk about that can show up. So, all of a sudden something can happen. An aluminum sheet cannot get manufactured correctly. You can have a problem with a shipment where a truck has a problem on the road delivering, or you have a high acceleration in some avionics parts that are being shipped someplace, and all those cause you problems. And those are the kind of things that we're trying to protect for. They're in those models that we talk about when we go out to that 2023 date, and those are the kind of things we're protecting for. But we're trying to build margin wherever we can, and where the teams can get ahead, they'll work ahead. And Orion is a pretty exciting vehicle, and and you ought to get a chance to take a look at the hardware, the avionics and software, and the people that work on it. It's a very, very impressive program.
And for Greg, for me, it's the testing. When the next couple of years, we're going to be getting into a lot of testing on the systems, and that's really where we learn. That's where the hardware talks to us and tells us what's going on. And it's very similar to what Gers said about the panels. You know, we start taking weight out, and all of a sudden they want to flatten out. That's something we learned in this process, and we didn't plan on having to learn that, but we learned it, and we're moving on, and the team's pressing. But with the amount of testing we've got, and then the coordination of that testing, the efficiency around that testing, getting it done once instead of doing it once and then having to come back and doing it again. You know, that kind of planning activity. The team has a good plan, but there's always that chance of a hiccup and things that we learn, because we want to learn too. That's the reason that we do the testing. So that's my one thing.
Thank you. We'll take the next question.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Frank Mooring from Aviation Week. Your line is open.
Thank you. Robert, I think you mentioned one of the issues that came up was reuse of elements as the development program goes forward. And I seem to recall that early on Lockheed Martin said that they were actually going to refly or at least retest some of the elements, maybe use them in drop tests. Could you walk us through in a little bit more detail what those elements are that were initially done to save money, and if you're going to have to build new elements, or just what exactly you have to do to get comfortable with that part of it? And also, could someone please tell me what the cost of Orion was up to the start date on the $6.77 billion, which I think was August of this year?
October.
Yeah,
October. Thank you.
I think it was $4.7 billion, Frank, for that one. To answer the second half of your question. Go ahead, Bill.
I can help you on the first one. One of the major things is we're going to take all the avionics boxes that fly on EM1, and with the intent right now is to refly those boxes on EM2. So that the concern is that if you have any kind of problem with the box on EM1 and it's not available for EM2, you could run into a problem where that impacts the build of EM2. So that's one area of reuse that we're concerned about. It's pretty straightforward. We're looking to see if maybe we could advance some avionics box purchases. I think right now we have an entire ship set gets reused. Maybe we only reuse a portion of that. So we'll try to mitigate some of those risks. But that's one example of a reuse item.
Yeah, and Frank, the other one that goes in the other direction, where the program actually made a decision to build some extra hardware, is in the launch abort system area. We were planning on reusing, and we said, that the risk associated with that, mainly from a schedule perspective, just didn't make sense. So Mark Geiger and the team made the decision to go ahead and purchase another bit of hardware. So those are two good examples.
We'll take the next question.
Thank you. The next question comes from Jeff Faust from Space News. Your line is open.
Yeah, I'm wondering how much the schedule estimate is dependent on budget. If you get more money for Orion, as Congress has been wanting to do in recent years, does that accelerate your schedule from April 2023 towards 2021?
I think that one of the factors in the model, Jeff, is absolutely budget. As we look at that, it's a piece or percentage of that model as we go forward. So the certainty or the amount of budget we get in any given year definitely does that. Now, it's also a timing thing. It's when you get it. I mean, I can't get it all at the last year and expect to, be able to work that. So depending on what budget certainty, what we did is we chose to use the president's budget request, and that's the most certain we have, and the run out of that throughout the years.
Thank you. We'll take the next question.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Eric Berger from the Houston Chronicle. Your line is open.
Hello. Thank you very much for doing this. I guess this is a question for Gers. Now I realize you're probably at least half a decade away from deciding on specifics for a human Mars missions, but that's kind of what Orion has talked about as the vehicle or a vehicle in that mission. Could you talk a little bit about where Orion would lie on the critical path in terms of an eventual human mission to Mars? Is it something astronauts would ride in potentially on the way there, or would it be waiting for them when they get back? I mean, is this a piece that you need essentially to get back to the surface of the Earth from Earth orbit or from the Moon? Talk about that, please.
Yep. Clearly on the Mars class missions, Orion is a key player. We've designed the heat shield to return at essentially lunar velocities, and we demonstrated 80% of that on EFT-1. So it's clearly the capsule that crews will return to Earth on from exploration class missions. I think the first real critical role that Orion starts playing is when we go to the proving ground of space, and we kind of define the proving ground of space as a region around the moon where we can get back in several days if something goes wrong. And what we need to do is we need to take, all the skills that we've learned in low Earth orbit where, we're pretty comfortable working on the space station every day. We have crews up there for the last 15 years. But if something goes wrong on station, you can be home in a matter of hours. And we need to now start stretching our ability to be comfortable in space and operate and have procedures and hardware and techniques where we can now be, several days away before we can get back to the Earth. And the moon is a great place to do that. And Orion is a very capable vehicle to help with that proving ground kind of missions. Orion's unique in the fact that it's not just a capsule. It has some habitation capability, and it can support, 4 crew for up to 21 days. And what that gives us is an ability to actually use the capsule without any other hardware around the moon to do some precursor, or we call them proving ground or learning activities around the moon. So I think Orion's first role will be really to be that tool that will help us go push human presence beyond low Earth orbit and let us learn the skills, techniques, test hardware in the proving ground of space around the moon that will actually prepare us then to go to the Earth independent region or to start moving out towards Mars. So Orion is a predominant first key player in really allowing us to move human presence out of low Earth orbit. So I think it has a very, very bright future for us as we move forward into this space.
Thank you. We'll take the next question.
Thank you. Our next question comes from James Dean from the Florida Today. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Mr. Gersmar, could you please recap what you expect the EM2 mission to be and, what the crew will, how many crew, what it will do, where they'll go, and regarding the readiness state, how vulnerable is it to moving back if EM1 slips? Or conversely, I was wondering if, with these confidence levels in the past, I think they project further out to say, maybe by, June, July, August, or whatever, you might step up to 90% confidence. Can you give us a sense, how that confidence level improves over time past that April timeframe?
Okay. Well, we'll kind of start with maybe your first question. If EM1 slips, it doesn't necessarily impact EM2. And we need to be very careful that, Robert described this very well in his opening remarks, that we're not really flying 2 missions. We're really building a capability that moves us beyond low Earth orbit, as I described in my earlier discussion. And what we've got to do is we've got to be careful that if we just wanted to launch EM1 by some date, we could move test requirements off of EM1 and then move them later into portions of EM2 and maybe downscope EM2. And that's not what we want to go do. We want to make sure that we get all the right testing done on EM1 that we can actually move forward with EM2. So to get some of that testing done on EM1, you could actually envision a case where you might slip EM1 a little bit, but that by slipping EM1 a little bit, that actually ensures that EM2 will be on time because that testing doesn't have to be done on the ground. Those test objectives can be done in space on EM1. So it's kind of not straightforward, but it's a very integrated schedule kind of between EM1 and EM2, but there's not a one-to-one tie. If EM1 slips, it doesn't necessarily mean EM2 moves. Then to your other question about the kind of things we'll be doing with EM2, the big thing with crew is we want to go look at we use EM1 to check out the service module to make sure we can do the burns in and out of a distant retrograde orbit around the moon. We'll make sure that the communication systems work. We'll make sure the navigation stuff works. We'll make sure all the software works. But then comes EM2, and the big thing there are the crew interfaces. How does the crew interact with the vehicle? What are the displays and controls like? What do they do during entry configuration? Those things. So there'll be a lot of testing done on EM2 to check out the vehicle and how it interacts with the human. The other big thing with EM2 is we get the life support system. So we'll have the oxygen supplies available. We'll have CO2 removal capability. We'll have humidity control, temperature control. All those things will get checked out and rung out on EM2. So again, I think what EM2 stresses is EM2 really makes sure that the vehicle is ready to interact with the crew and is ready to go do the crew. And then after that, then we get on with more objective tests like EM3, where we'll do maybe automated rendezvous kind of things. We'll do some precision checkout. We'll do some stuff on the far side of the moon where we don't lose comm with Orion to look at more autonomous crew operations. We'll get a chance to see some pieces there. So the way it flows is the first EM1, you kind of check out the vehicle, make sure that the vehicle really performs. It's a solid vehicle. EM2, you check out the vehicle again. You reconfirm what you learned on EM1. You bring in the interaction with the crew. You make sure the crew interactions with the vehicle are really ready to go. And then by EM3, you're really ready to go use Orion and start pushing those proving ground objectives and doing the training that gets you into deep space.
Thank you. We'll take the next question.
Yes, our next question comes from Jason Davis from the Planetary Society. Your line is open.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. My question kind of follows on your last comment. I was going to ask how the objectives of EM2 might change if you're forced to move it 2 years to the right on the schedule. Would there be a possibility of combining it with the asteroid redirect mission if that goes forward, or is that off the table at this point for EM2? Thanks.
Again, it depends how testing goes on the ground and how progress occurs. You think of this as a test program where you want to test as much as you can, but you don't want to test too much, that you've really, you've stressed the system or you push too hard. So that's the balance of what's the right level of testing. And have you gained enough confidence in the vehicle that you can really use it operationally, and you don't have to worry about the vehicle operating. You know the vehicle's going to operate. You know its systems are going to work, and then you're ready to do the challenges of the mission. So I think you would likely not do the asteroid redirect mission on that first Orion crew flight just because of the complexity of the two activities. But it depends really what happens on the EM2. If we really have high confidence in the vehicle and we don't think there'll be any concerns, you could potentially attempt to go do the asteroid redirect mission and then stop at some point if something doesn't work out right. But I think in general you would really like to get the vehicle fully checked out and spend some time doing some unique things with the vehicle to make sure the crew interactions with the vehicle really work the way you intended. Make sure the software is really debugged. You really understand how the vehicle operates. So then when you go to that kind of operational mission like the asteroid redirect mission where your focus now is to go do an EVA and depress the Orion capsule and go out and grab a sample off the asteroid, to make sure that you can really focus on all those first, depressing the capsule, doing the EVA, grabbing the sample. So to avoid making the mission overly complex, you want to get the vehicle checked out, you want to understand how it operates, and then you can put it in this more stressful environment. And if you think about that, that's really the same strategy we're using with the Mars class mission, is we want to use the vicinity around the moon as really the place to really wring out our systems and understand how our hardware operates and how our crews can be more autonomous so they're ready to go to take that next step.
Thank you. We'll take the next question.
Yes, our next question comes from Elizabeth Howell from Discovery News. Your line is open.
Hello, I was curious about how astronaut selection would change given the higher G loads and the smaller physical constraints in terms of space for the astronauts on the Orion when the time comes. Thank you.
Gerst, you want to hit that?
Yeah, I don't really know that there's dramatic changes. The G loads are higher, but I don't think it's changed any of our physical considerations. And I don't know the answer about the astronaut size and makeup. So maybe Stephanie can get back to you with an answer on those specifics and see if there's been any changes. I don't think there are any, but Stephanie can get with the right technical folks and answer your question.
We'll get back to you on that, Elizabeth. And we'll take the last question.
Thank you. Our last question comes from Ken Kremer from Universe Today. Your line is open.
Hi, thanks for taking my question and for doing this. Actually, my question is about the asteroid redirect mission. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what is the latest thinking about what that mission will entail, what is the timing, And, some serious people have thought about sending the unmanned probe to Phobos and then bringing a sample back from there. What's your thinking about that? Thank you.
Maybe I'll let Robert start, and then I'll finish.
Yeah, I think for us, we're continuing to press again toward what we said before. It clearly we're waiting to see what the 16 budget looks like and what the final outcome on the deliberations on the budget. The teams are making great progress. We've got a capture mechanism delivered to Goddard from the folks at Langley. They're putting it in with the robotics team out there and starting to put that piece of the activity together. We continue to make great progress in the solar electric propulsion world. The team at Glenn and the team at Jet Propulsion Lab are knocking those are working on reducing the risk associated with that, especially in the power unit associated with that. We still think that's a good demonstration mission for us to demonstrate a lot of the capability that we're going to. The baseline is still to take a boulder off of a larger asteroid and bring it back into the cislunar space. For all the reasons that Bill described, it's a great operational mission for us to start doing interaction in an area different than low Earth orbit. So, the future could be. The future missions could actually go more. Clearly, we want to go to the Mars vicinity at some point, and we're still looking at that. But the main thing is we got to demonstrate the technology now, and then we'll see what we can use it for in the future. Gerst, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think Robert covered it pretty well. There's been a lot of work done on electric propulsion. Some RFPs have been back. We've got responses, and we're currently in blackout on those. But that's been a very, very productive activity, and that's moving forward. As Robert said, we'll get the details through the budget activity and see how that comes out for the asteroid redirect mission. The robotic activities, the arms, and some of the capture devices, the teams have made really tremendous progress on that activity. So again, things are moving pretty well. We'll just continue to keep moving, and then the mission, seems pretty good. We'll just see how the budget activities shake out here in the next year or so.
Okay, we will take one more question, and then any closing remarks from Mr. Lightfoot and Mr. Gerstenmaier.
Thank you. The last question is from Mike Wall from Space.com. Your line is open.
Yes, hi guys. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for doing this. Just a quick question, kind of following on what the last caller asked. It's a little early to think about timing for the EM3, but if EM2 does get pushed back to 2023, how would that impact what the next flight would be? EM3, would that push that back another 2 years or so, or could it come closely on the heels of EM2? What are you guys thinking about that in terms of timing?
Yeah, again, the way I think Robert described it very good at the beginning, and maybe you can add some more, is we're really trying to build a program where we can build hardware ahead. So depending on what causes the schedule slip on EM2, if we can still make progress on EM3 and start buying some hardware and keep it moving forward, we would do that. So again, I think you're not going to see a slip caused by EM3 to where EM2 is. Ultimately, we'd like to get where we're flying these exploration missions about once per year. We're still working through the budget process to find all the funding and to get production and operations costs down to where we can fly roughly once a year. But we want to fly these missions, after EM2 roughly on about 1 year centers. So we're putting together plans and processes. The things we talked about even on Orion, where we changed some of the manufacturing to reduce the number of welds. That was done to really help with production so we could manufacture the capsule a little bit faster. Some of the Pathfinder work we're doing, we're finding out that maybe we don't need to do that Pathfinder work every time, and we can actually reduce production schedules for that. The other thing is we made the heat shield change to go to the block heat shield from the Avcoat monolithic heat shield. Again, I told you that the engineering article was going to be ready maybe by the end of October, which is pretty quick. And what that says is we've potentially got a better manufacturing for that heat shield. So all these things are aimed at building a producible system that's affordable that we can fly on roughly a 1 year center. So I wouldn't get too worried about these schedules. If we do our homework right and we take our time going through the developmental process and we understand how to improve production and we don't focus on just this mission EM2, but we also make the changes that put the right production systems in place, the right supply lines in place, we can get to where we can have a very functional capability that's affordable, and we can continue to fly these exploration missions that will ultimately get us ready to go to Mars.
Yeah, and I think that the only thing I would add is I think, once we get the capability in place of being able to launch Orion on a routine basis, there are numerous things we need to do to get ready to go to Mars, as Gerst said. And I kind of look at it as today, we'll change the manifest of a cargo supply mission to station just based on what we need or what's the next thing on the list. I fully expect as we go forward that the EMs will fall in that capability, in that same kind of arrangement. What technology is ready to be demonstrated, what needs to be demonstrated, what can the crew do from an operational perspective that we learned from the last mission, and they'll build on each other to get us ready to go. And I think, trust me, there's plenty on our plate to use those EM missions for, and we just have to prioritize those as we move forward.
Thank you. That will conclude the questions. Any closing remarks, Mr. Lightfoot?
Gerst, all for Gerst. Anything from you, Gerst?
No, I don't have anything else to add. Again, I want to thank all the reporters for the interest today, and I think that this is a pretty exciting time in human spaceflight. There's more development going on in the human spaceflight arena, especially in my directorate, than ever occurred in a long time in the history of the agency. And it's exciting doing all the development. It's not it's different than operations, but it's just every bit as exciting. And what's exciting about it is you can kind of fast forward a little bit, and with my operational background, I can see the future of how we can really use this hardware in pretty amazing ways. And we're really, again, showing leadership by moving forward with both SLS and Orion and really moving activities forward. The work we're doing with commercial crew, and I think this is the 1-year anniversary of the selection of the commercial crew providers. That's an exciting capability. What's happening on Space Station with the 1-year expedition is also pretty amazing. So I think if you step back and you look at this period, this is a pretty pivotal time as we're really putting the United States in a place to really continue to push human presence throughout the solar system. And again, we'll do that leveraging off of the private sector and leveraging off the international partners wherever we can. So again, thanks for your time today. Robert?
Can't add anything to that, Gerst. That was well said. So thanks to everybody for being on today.
Thank you all for joining us today to discuss the progress on NASA's Orion Crew Module. You will be able to listen to a replay of this teleconference in about an hour by dialing toll-free 866-481-6889. The passcode is 7897. Thank you and have a good afternoon.
Thank you for your participation in today's conference. All participants may disconnect at this time.